Crafting a concept album is a tricky thing. I once attempted it, the ghosts of such are currently unlisted on this channel, and found it difficult to create a clear plot through line using music alone. You would think that using vocals would make this task easier, use the lyrics to tell the tale, but that in itself creates a much more difficult problem, crafting interesting songs. It's no good having the album make sense when listened to front to back, but the tracks fail to stand alone. So how do you write a lyrical concept album where a complete narrative is explored without each song just essentially becoming plot narration? The answer is with extreme amounts of care, attention and talent. When all falls into place on a concept album, the experience can feel cinematic in nature, truly epic to listen to. A $10 Patreon supporter of mine, B Crimson, requested an excellent example of such an album, and one that I personally adore. I'm Roasting Charmaine, and this is Exploring the Concept. I remember always being kind of meh on My Chemical Romance. I liked a handful of their tracks, but I was far from wild on them, and naming no names, there were some mega fans of theirs at my college that really put me off giving more of a chance to the band. I know that shouldn't affect my appreciation of the music, but it really did. They were really annoying people. That all changed when I saw them live at Leeds Fest 2011. They headlined the main stage, something many people were up in arms about, but I doubt that there were many detractors left by the time the set ended. They were phenomenal. I remember quite liking a few tracks on the 3 Cheers album, namely To The End and You Know What They Do to Guys Like Us in Prison. Now, I don't know who chose the singles to release from the Black Parade, but they literally chose the 4 weakest tracks on the album. Both of those first 2 records are mostly good, often excellent, but have several weak spots each. Danger Days, well, that's another story. A fantastic record that, whilst it may not quite hit the heights of its predecessor, it holds a high standard throughout. And what's more, it frames a fascinating, exciting, intriguing tale that spreads through the entire runtime. In this video, we will explore the lyrical and thematic content of this record and dig into the story within. As ever, what I'll discuss are my interpretations of these tracks, not necessarily what the artists have stated or intended. Let's go.
Sunshine 109 in the sky, but the pigs won't quit. You're here with me, Dr. Death Defying. I'll be your surgeon.
This short intro track serves as the framing device for the album we're about to experience. Our host, Dr. Death Defying, says nothing specific and initially doesn't directly name any heroes or villains. He more sets the stage. His delivery and verbiage conjure images of a pirate radio station in the midst of an oppressive society. He then guides us to the first track, quoting the villain's catchphrase and calling out the protagonist of the piece.
The future is bulletproof. The aftermath is secondary. It's time to do it now and do it loud. Killjoys, make some noise.
Here we have our introduction to the heroes of the story, or rather the anti-heroes. Fitting after my last video. They fight for good, but they do bad things to do so. Moreover, they revel in their rebellion and take joy in causing havoc. After the macho posing and meagre threats are all said and done, we get to the meat of this opening track, the call to arms as it were. The Killjoys, as they've dubbed themselves, will do anything to further their cause, including giving their lives for it. This is the lone true moment in a braggadocious song, and that's by design. In my mind, I imagine this being a recruitment drive to add numbers to the Killjoy cause, making out their lifestyle to be all excitement and action. Keeping with the theme of the previous track, Bulletproof Heart opens like a recruitment drive, although one that takes the threat more seriously. Perhaps this is the track welcoming the new rebels they hoodwinked in Na Na Na. They insinuate that not even the physical laws of the universe can stop them, but acknowledge the danger that faces them in these opening lines. A promise of what is to come. The Killjoys will storm the gates, attacking the establishment in a haze of gunfire and glory, but some of them will die, and that doesn't matter, only the cause is of concern. One final chance for the new recruits to back out if they feel the pressure or risk is too great. The speaker is demanding total commitment and bravery in the face of certain death, something not easily promised and extremely difficult to deliver. More layers added to the dystopian society in which the story is set. The speaker implores the listener to stand for what they believe in and don't allow their oppression to be met with meek compliance. More criticism of the general populace for allowing themselves to remain oppressed and downtrodden without offering enough by way of resistance. This is the anti-heroes shaming the masses into joining the fight, a bold tactic. The time for recruitment speeches is over and the fight is on. The government have eyes everywhere, so you need to move fast to stay alive. Our heroes tell their new followers to stick close and be prepared to fight or fly. The world is on the brink of figuratively exploding, free human life coming to an end. Our protagonist is off into battle, something he is excited for and loves doing. This line, more than any other, shows his anti-hero status. He feels he has to defend humanity and save the world, but he revels in the idea of killing and dying for his cause. He is a great man, but not necessarily a good one. The party meaning the ruling class, not a shindig. This is the first outright call to violence. Robbery is now part of the mission, killing the rich and stealing their riches. And again, many will die in the process, for the cause.
Across these city streets, where were you when all of the embers fell lost?
Continuing on the themes of the previous tracks, this song touches on a more serious and somber side of the conflict. The protagonist hopes that he will be remembered and that others will carry on his crusade after his seemingly inevitable demise.
The bombs they build, if there's a place that I could be, then I'd be another memory. Can I be the only hope for you? Because you're the only hope for me. And if we can't find where we belong, we'll have to work it out around. Face all the pain and take it on. Because the only hope for me is you alone.
Just as his revolutionary cohorts have placed their trust in him and his leadership, he asks in turn for them to carry on his legacy should he fall. Again though, he doesn't seem particularly saddened by the thought of this. He merely wants to secure their continued support.
Bad news from the zones, tumbleweeds. It looks like Jetstar and the Cobra Kid had a clap with an exterminator that went all Costa Rica and got themselves ghosted, dusted out on.
The pirate radio host from the opening track informs the listener of the somewhat predictable demise of two key killjoys. He then preaches the continued fight of the remaining members. You would expect such an announcement to be followed by a downcast, slower track.
Say rock and cheetah with a capital T, so get your hands up, now get your hands up. Hide your eyes are gonna shine tonight. Summertime will never get the best of me. Ain't a DJ gonna save my soul. I slowly log it, going rock and roll. Drop the needle when the tape that blow. I'm gonna shout this out so everybody knows.
Instead, we are greeted by a high-octane track that once again uses the metaphor of a party to describe killing and dying. The pre-chorus clearly implies a bombing, conjuring images in my head of a post-apocalyptic Tyler Durden. The main protagonist plots and executes an elaborate and violent revenge for his fallen friends, and chastises the listener and our fellow followers for grieving and wallowing in self-pity instead. He admonishes the listener for feeling those negative emotions rather than channeling them into violence and anger as he is doing. This song, for me, seals his fate more than any other. The bravado and violence continues into what was, for a long time, my favourite track on the record. It has since been usurped by another track that we'll get to. This song is, even more than the other tracks, the headlong charge into willful death. The protagonist acknowledges that this battle could well be his last and charges in heedless. Spoiler warning in this line. Perhaps now dealing with the deaths of his close allies, the protagonist now accepts that his crusade against the unstoppable forces of the world, money and power, are ultimately futile. He simply wishes to be remembered as a hero and an instigator of change, abandoning the idea of ever living to see it. For the first time on the record, the protagonist appears to address a distinct person, a love interest perhaps. Interesting. I wonder if this will come back. Spoilers again, it will. That's not really much of a spoiler, is it? I've said this record is cinematic and excellent, so it's hardly going to introduce and then abandon a love angle plot thread. A villain has entered the fray. The normally fearless and headstrong protagonist, who charges into danger with little by way of heed, is fleeing from this scarecrow monster, and preaching that his followers do the same. This scarecrow would appear to be some kind of torturer, or perhaps favours a flamethrower as his or her weapon of choice. Either way, the threat is significant enough to warrant extreme amounts of fear in the Killjoys for the first time in the story so far. Throughout the record, we've been fed a sense of impending doom and acknowledgement of it. This, however, feels like the first time that such emotion is real, rather than a symptom of extreme bravado. The Killjoys say goodbye to their final sunset, allowing themselves to reflect on the fun times of their lives, their loves, before heading to their reckoning. I told you that the love plot angle would return. This is my favourite track on the record these days. You know I love a good new wave throwback. The protagonist returns to his lover in the wake of what he assumes will be his final fight. He asks her, at least I'm assuming her from context, if she will continue to bear his weight as his responsibilities and crusade continue to wear him down, as she has done for many years. This is the first truly sweet moment on the record. I love the verbiage in these lines. The idea of being willing to wait as long as needed for the one you love and daydreaming about running away with them. Within the narrative, this serves as our anti-hero having one final moment of doubt. Could we just run away? Would you want to? The futility of their final fight is apparent to the protagonist, and he expresses as much to his remaining Killjoys. They repair their ranks as best they can, but they are in a losing battle, a fact that is unavoidable. The vast majority of the population still have faith in their oppressors and don't see the need to rally against them. The Killjoys choose to take pride in this, allowing themselves to be seen as the villains of the piece, something that in actual fact would count massively against them. The cause is all but lost at this point. The force they battle against is unstoppable and unbeatable, yet they will continue the crusade regardless. Their fate is upon them. This line appears to fly in the face of many of the lines from the first half of the record, where the protagonist is preaching his views and attempting to convince the populace to turn to anarchy in favour of their oppressive leader. He no longer cares about the message, he has truly given up hope. This is the sad demise of a formerly fired up young rebel. He knows that his mission has failed, that his memory won't inspire change, and that his life is close to ending. If you expected a happy ending, you're listening to the wrong band.
Alright, children, the lights are out and the party's over. It's time for me, Dr. D, to start running and say goodbye for a little while. And
We return to Dr. Deathify one final time for him to report that the Killjoy cause is lost, and that all associated with them must now go into hiding. They did tell you that this is how the story would end in Save Yourself, I'll Hold Them Back, remember? A fitting end really to a cinematic album about a small group of renegades fighting an unstoppable governmental juggernaut. Life isn't like Star Wars. This is more how those fights would go, with death and little else achieved. Not exactly a feel-good ending, but what a fantastic record. And no, I'm not doing Vampire Money, as that isn't part of the concept, and it's a thinly veiled diss track on the Twilight movies that, as you can probably imagine, hasn't aged terribly well. If you haven't checked out this record and want to experience something akin to cinema and musical sound only, I can't recommend this highly enough. If you'd like to watch more videos like this, there are many more on my channel. Follow me on Patreon for regular updates. Update posts are always free. Until next time, I've been Royston Charmaine, and remember, even if you're dusted, you may be gone, but your shadow lives on without you.